everybody, good afternoon and welcome to today's CATHETA webinar. We're coming to you live on February 19th, and today you're tuning in for day 2 of the Executive Leadership and Engagement in the Time of Crisis series. Your instructor is Dr. William R. Latchford, who is president of the Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group. My name is Brooke Warrington. I am the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that you could join us for today's webinar. If you could follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law pictured here. So just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. You can access today's course material as well as any of the other courses through the Courses tab here on the website. I'm also copying and pasting today's presentation slides as well as the recording of yesterday's webinar into the chat for you. So both those links are there now. If this is your first time on a CATHETA webinar today on our new platform, just know that moving forward, you're going to have access to all the webinars that we host, as well as the previous ones that have already happened. So when there is an actual live webinar happening, you'll log in and click on that green banner, and that's how you'll join for any of the webinars moving forward. You won't have to re-register, you just register that one time. When we join, we ask that you select listen only, just to cut down on any kind of audio feedback with our instructor or myself doing the introduction. And if you find that your audio is not coming out of the correct device that you would like it to, you can click on that little telephone icon down at the bottom of your screen, and you can change your mic or your speaker device there. We encourage you guys to use the chat box today for any kind of comments or questions or possibly any tech support issues that you have. I can try to help you navigate it. If you click on public chat up on that left-hand menu panel, it'll bring up the chat and anything you want to send in for everyone else to see. Any questions or comments, you can just type them into that box and then click on the paper airplane button or hit enter and it'll show up. As we get going now, let's go ahead and get the chat box going. You can let us know your name, where you're joining us from, your work or your role in Indian country, and your tribal affiliation, please. And while y'all are starting off the chat, just a quick final note that if you click on that red menu panel all the way to the left-hand side, it will pull you out of the webinar. You can quickly rejoin by clicking on the green banner, but just a heads up, if you click on that red part, it does take you out. All right, folks, without any further ado, it is with great pleasure I introduce today's webinar instructor, Dr. William Latchford. And Will, I will hand it off to you now.
All right, thank you, Brooke. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the second webinar of the 4 series of executive leadership and engagement in the time of crisis. This is day number 2. Today, we're going to focus a little bit on strategic decision-making in the time of crisis. So leadership is a vast topic that, of course, we all know can't be communicated within a 90-minute period, but strategic decision-making in times of crisis is a good topic that we can provide some leadership wisdom to you and pass along that we hope may help you through your process, not just only on an average day, but also during the time of crisis. A little bit about Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group. It's owned by Amy Osceola Latchford. She's a member of the Seminole Tribe of Florida of the Otter Clan. The business is a certified small business public safety organization that specializes in leadership and public safety development. Our whole goal and mission under Amy's leadership is to ensure that whoever we come in contact with and put our hands on, it's to enhance and make their organizations better through our experience of over 175 years of public safety and leadership experience that we have through our consultants around the country. Currently, we have retired individuals from Fortune 500 companies, emergency management officials, retired police chiefs and special agents from the Bureau of Indian Affairs or the FBI, and also tribal police chiefs, to include tribal police chiefs in Canada. So our reach is pretty far across the country, and we'd like to, again, just to enhance and go in and take our experience to enhance your organization to make it better today than it was tomorrow. A little bit about me. My name is Will Latchford. I have a doctorate in criminal justice. I've spent 32 years. I was honored to work for the Seminole Tribe of Florida. I had the opportunity to start the boots level on the ground. And when I retired 30 years later, I ended up retiring as the executive director of public safety, overseeing law enforcement, fire rescue, and emergency management across 10 geographical locations the tribe has throughout the state of Florida, from Central Florida all the way down to Southern Florida. I've had the opportunity to work with the best public safety individuals across the country and Indian country, being deployed to Hurricane Sandy and also Hurricane Katrina, provided me the opportunity to kind of spread my wings a little bit and learn from others across Indian country, and also to be able to spread that knowledge that we have at the Seminole Tribe to spread to other tribes, so the wheel's not reinvented. So I'm honored to be here with you today. My educational background is, again, my doctorate's from St. Leo University. I have a master's from St. Leo University in Homeland Security, and a public administration bachelor's degree from Barry University. I've graduated from the top leadership schools across the country, from the University of Louisville's Command Officers Development Course, the FBI Leader Program, and also the FBI National Academy. So my whole goal after being retired is continue to work and to just spread that knowledge that I was fortunate to gain from the journey that I had throughout my career, and pass that along to others, to just help them enhance and make them better in their craft and what they do as far as leadership, public safety, or any aspect of management. Just a disclaimer for Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group. We shouldn't have any issues today, but if we do, and I say something that's contradictory to your organizational policies, please refer back to your organizational policy. Your organization and the policies you have in place and the procedures you have in place are important. So please defer to your organization official guidelines and protocols. If you do hear or determine that there's a conflict in some of the verbiage that I may have used today, please give your organizations the respect and adhere to the internal policies and procedures, and go back and just get clarification so you have the right answer in regards to your environment. Because as we know, can't paint everything with the same brush. And it's important to me that we can share information and we can pass information along to each other, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work in our specific environment. So we may have to tweak it a little bit. So again, your policies are very important. All right, so as we navigate the executive leadership and engagement in time of crisis, decision-making in crisis is complex. And through that complexity, a lot of things go into it, and a lot of things is affected when we look at those complexities. So cognitive biases, every one of us have an experience. We have good experiences, bad experiences. We have trauma that we develop throughout our life. And when we go into crisis, those specific areas sometimes expose themselves and they come to the forefront. So cognitive biases explore how cognitive biases affect our judgment and decision-making, particularly during the time of stress. And as we know, during a crisis, we're in stress mode. Our anxiety's up, our adversity's up. And as I indicated yesterday, and you'll hear me continue to say, is that it's very easy to be a leader when things are quiet. It's very easy to be a leader when when things are great and things are good and there's no issues on the table. Where we really learn what type of leader we are is during that time of crisis, when that adversity or that challenge comes across our desk. And that's really how we grow, how we learn, how we navigate good decisions, how we navigate maybe not so good decisions, but it gives us the opportunity to take those good decisions and continue to build off of them. And then also take those bad decisions and build on them so they become good decisions. So throughout the decision-making framework, you learn how to develop and implement effective strategies throughout the framework when you're put in a high pressure situation. And that's really where you learn what type of leader you are, and really how good you are or where you need to improve. right? So, and the only competitor that you're focusing on is yourself. You're not focusing on other leaders that you know in other programs or in the program yourself or other tribal leaders. The competition, which is I always looked at as a challenge, is always myself. That's the biggest competitor that I have, and that's the only one that I have to prove things to. So the biggest challenge that you have is your own wall that you put up. So leadership is only as good as you give that opportunity to grow. And through decision making during a crisis, a lot of biases come upon us, and sometimes we have to recognize when that occurs. So the impact of cognitive biases, what they do is they impact and they alter our decisions, right? What I call it's a mental shortcut that we subconsciously do because of our experiences or our thought process. So confirmation bias, and there's several different biases out there. We're going to just cover a couple of them today. But confirmation bias is the tendency to favor information confirming that your existing beliefs, and you ignore the contradictory evidence. So basically, confirmation bias is that you think you know what you're seeing, but the reality is you're not seeing the facts of that current crisis. And so what you think you know on an everyday basis, when you go into that stress mode, that's what you're relying on, and you're not relying on that particular crisis. So it's important as a leader when you go into crisis that you identify that in your own self to make sure that you're looking at the facts that are in front of you and you're not predisposing the decisions or what you have to do based on what you did in the past or what you thought things were and what your perceptions were. So you want to make sure that you follow the evidence, that you follow what's in front of you, and you may be right when you look at your previous assumptions, but you want to confirm that before you make decisions. Another area is anchor bias. Anchor bias is overly relying on the first piece of information encountered. If it's irrelevant or not, it doesn't matter. So basically during a time of crisis, you may get information from somebody and you automatically believe that and you run with that information. The reality is that anchor bias is that first information that comes and hits your brain, and then that sticks with you, and you kind of get tunnel vision. So you want to try to avoid anchor biases during that process because you could actually travel down the wrong path as a leader when it comes to your strategic decisions. When it comes to anchor bias, one of the examples I would provide you is when you're in a courtroom and you're listening to the prosecutor describe and recommend a penalty possibly for the defendant. And they put out there that the defendant should serve between 2 years and 34 or 2 months and 34 months. So by putting that out there, the prosecutor is putting that out to all our brains that that's what his sentence or her sentence should be. The reality is that also puts us in a position where we're thinking, okay, 2 to 34. How come it's not more than 34? How come it's not less than 2? So that's where our anchor bias comes in. If we just take that 2 to 34 and we listen to the prosecutor without taking in aspect the entire case, the entire trial, and really what the rules that we can sentence somebody on, we may just stick to 2 months to 34 months just because that's the first thing we heard from the prosecutor, and that's what we run with. So we want to make sure that we keep that in consideration when it comes to leadership in the time of crisis. The availability heuristic is overestimating the likelihood of events based on their immediate availability and memory, right? So that's basically just making things worse than what it really is. So as we're in crisis, sometimes stress, if we don't handle stress well, or we're put in a position where things are coming at us very fast and we need to respond, and we know we need to respond as leaders, we overemphasize or overestimate really what we have to do based on the current event. So you want to make sure that through your process of being a leader that you don't go overzealous when it comes to making decisions. And that's important when you progress through the decision-making process, as I'll talk about here in a little bit. It's important that you strategically do and you think through in the crisis. So the recommendation that I'll provide you today is whenever you're in crisis, always take the time to take a breath, right? Sometimes we lose that opportunity because the demands on us are so much, and people are expecting information so fast, and they expect us to have that answer, and it better be the right answer. And the reality is, on an everyday in society, we expect that of ourselves. We get on our phones and we put information in on our phones, and we expect that information to be delivered to us in milliseconds over our cell phones, right? And if it doesn't happen, then we're frustrated because the social media app isn't working. Maybe it's the internet, maybe it's the cell service that's impacting that answer. And so we're so used to getting that information so fast. When a crisis happens, the general public in your communities don't see any different. They want that information that fast. And when you're in the middle of a crisis, there's a lot of times you can't provide that information that fast. So you want to make sure that you don't have that reaction of availability heuristic to where you're then giving information out too fast and you're overestimating your decision-making process. So just keep that in mind. Cognitive biases can impair a leader's ability to make a rational and objective decision. During a crisis, this leads to ineffective strategies. It leads to miscommunication, and really it makes the whole circumstance to deliver a poor outcome as a leader. So you want to recognize and actively mitigate these biases and try to make sure that you're informed and you're more informed with decisions and foster a team performance, because you're not alone. And that's one thing that I recommend to you is always remember, you're not alone as a leader. You may have the title and people have that expectations for you, but you're not alone as a leader. You should have a good core team around you, and even people that are smarter than you that can provide you the information that you need to make the sound, effective decision. So mitigating the impact of cognitive biases, there are several things you can do. So you want to seek diverse perspectives, right? So as I just mentioned, is that you can incorporate the viewpoints of the people that are around you. And how do you do this? Well, you do this before the crisis happens. So on an everyday basis, you should, as the leader, you should be identifying who those key people are. If a crisis happens, who are you going to call? Sitting and listen to this webinar right now, I challenge all of you to just sit for a moment and think of a crisis that's in your environment, something that is most likely it's not going to happen to you today. There's a possibility someday it's going to happen, maybe not, but you want to role play that in your brain. And when that happens, who's your first call? And what do you say to them? Right? So you want to look at who those people are that you can surround yourself with, that you can count on to provide different viewpoints and challenge maybe what you think you see, or challenge what you think the way you should go, right? And you may have the right answer at the end of the day. And a lot of people in a leadership position during crisis, they don't want to listen to anybody because they feel they're the leader and they're just going to do it their way and not listen to anybody. And the reality is, a lot of times that creates a destructive outcome. So what you want to do in the meantime is you want to sit back in the time when it's not threatening, when the crisis isn't there, and sit while you're in your office or in your car and just self-reflect on those type of environments, from an active shooter situation that may come into your facility, or a storm that's going to hit, or a tornado that just pops up, in your community. What are those potential risks that are going to come at you? And those are those areas that you want to take the opportunity to just role play not only by yourself, but those opportunities that come around when you're sitting around having a cup of coffee with fellow leaders and your subordinates. Sit down and just have that non-threatening discussion, but know what you're going to do. At the end of the day, you want to formulate that plan. You want to put it down in writing for yourself, so you know exactly when that crisis hits. You have that template that you can go by. And we'll go through the webinar here, and there's a couple of slides that I think can help you as you navigate decision-making in crisis. You want to consider all the options, and that's why it's important to have people around you that you may not always agree with, right? Put them at the table with you so you can understand their point of view. They may not have the right answer, but they may have 25% of that answer that you can build off of, and you can make a better sound decision when it comes to that crisis that you're involved in. So you want to try to avoid relying solely on the first available information that's provided to you. You want to make sure that you evaluate and you analyze the information, get input from people around you, and that will help you mitigate the impacts of the cognitive biases that are out there. Some of the biases that are out there, just to name them, there's framing effect, there's overconfidence bias, there's groupthink bias. So there's a lot of different biases out there that we have and we hold, and that's all based on our previous experience, our traumas that we've been through, and really our outlook on a daily basis, how things should go. So you just want to make sure that as you navigate your decision-making in crisis, that you bring it all together, you bring all the information together, and you base your decision on the facts that are in front of you at that time, and also what direction you're going with that crisis, and how do you want to mitigate that crisis to keep your community safe as the leader. So as we look at decision-making frameworks for urgent situations or crises, there's a couple different models. There's the DECIDE model, right? That's the framework that prioritizes defining the problem, identifies options, and selects the best course of action, right? So that's sitting down, with your group in a crisis type setting and making that point of deciding what model you want to use. There's the SARA model, right? That's structured approach that emphasizes a situation by assessing and analyzing, providing the response to your community, and then evaluating, are you on the right page? And that's a constant process of doing the SARA model when you're in crisis. Then there's the RAPID model. That's a collaborative process for decision-making that involves recommending, agreeing, performing, and informing, right? So you're moving in these models, you're moving in different directions. That's going to help you depending on the situation. The recommendation for these models is know what model you're going to use when the crisis hits. Do the background that the model is going to fit right for your community. It's going to fit right for your leadership style, and it's going to fit for the purposes of your community, really, because at the end of the day, it's about us taking care of the community. And that is our customer. As a leader, if you're at the top of the chain or you're in the middle, you have your employees that are customers. The subordinates below you are the customers, and the community is the customer. So depending on how high you are, the more customers you may have. So you want to sit down and determine what model is going to be the best for you to navigate through the process. I will tell you, for me, the SARA model is a really good process that I use up and above the other two. And it's just because I'm more comfortable with it. I've used it more. I've used it in crisis settings, and I've used it in non-crisis settings. So the principles are there. So I've been able to take that knowledge skill that I've used through my career. And so that SARA model is one that I've consistently used over the other models that are out there. So find a model that works for you, test on it, practice it, put it in play on your everyday life. So when that crisis happens, you can make that decision through that framework of the model you're going to use. So when we tailor decision-making frameworks to tribal communities, what all that is just pre-planning, right? And this should be done when it comes to your tribal communities. I highly encourage you to take the time when the crisis isn't going on to write your policies and draft your policies that incorporate your cultural sensitive frameworks that align with your values and your traditions. Now, I also recognize the fact that some tribes putting policies, tribal traditions in policy is not necessarily something you want to do, and that's respectable. The other solution to that is train your people on those policies, have constant training on those values and traditions because it's not in writing. So when you have a workforce that's used to having policies that are in black and white, if you have cultural traditions that aren't in, and you're not going to put them in writing, make sure that you provide that opportunity for training for your employees. The reason for that is you're going to get a better work product out of them when the crisis is occurring. And when you are a leader in that crisis, you're going to be able to provide them leadership, and you're going to be able to talk them through whatever that framework is for your values and traditions. And they're going to know just based on retention, right? So a lot of times what we do, and we all learn through our careers and our life, is we go and we take tests just to pass the test, right? And that's great that we pass a test. But through this process of writing policies or doing the training to incorporate your tribal culture and values and traditions, I encourage you to make sure that you're just not doing this to check a box. Do it so your employees retain the information. They're just not doing it to take the test. We've all been in those positions where the teacher tells us, hey, you may want to remember this, or this is something that you may see again, right? Tells us a clue that, that's probably going to be on the quiz. It's probably going to be on the exam. The reality is we're not retaining the information for the right purpose. We're retaining it to pass the test. We want to make sure whatever information we put down in black and white in policy or through the training, if it's not in policy, we want to make sure that we are teaching it so people retain the information, not just to check the box to say, okay, I've been through this training. So I highly encourage you if you decide not to put values and traditions of your culture in policy, which is fine, just have something in place to where your employees can retain that information so they know it like as if it was in writing. You want to make sure you look at your self-governance. You want to prioritize tribal sovereignty and decision-making and the autonomy of tribal sovereignty and decision-making. You want to be that organization that always is in control of the situation. You want to be that leader that controls the outcome. And by doing this up front, before you get into crisis is really the foundation you want to build off of. So anything you do when it comes to your sovereignty, your decision making, when it comes to your autonomy, make sure you practice that. You have the process in place, so everyone knows that you're the leader. You're the one that is taking the responsibility on your shoulders, and the framework is in place for everybody to understand. The most important piece of crisis decision making is having the community involved. You want to make sure community members are involved in the decision making process. Now, this is a double-edged sword because sometimes when you present things to a community, your expectations and their expectations aren't aligned. You want to find out what their expectations are. If you can understand what their expectations are and you can transcribe those into policies and put them in place, or at least a little bit, even what they're saying, try to understand their aspect of it. That is something that it gives buy-in to them, that they see that their word matters, right? So, and that's important, right? It just may be a couple of phrases that you're putting in a policy that the community is going to buy into. So they may not always have the right answer, and that's fine, but give them the opportunity to let you know what their expectations are, and ask them what their expectations are, because you're the one who has to make the decisions as the leader when it comes to the time of crisis. So do this beforehand, before the crisis comes, so they understand, and you can role play with them as well, so they understand exactly what your expectations are. You know what their expectations are, and you're both on the same page, at least creating a framework. You may not agree on everything, but you create a framework when it comes to the decision-making process, and they understand what to expect when that crisis does occur. Part of the decision-making process is to be strategic, right? So when the stress is upon us and everything is coming at us, and people are barking orders at us, and they want answers, and sometimes your boss wants answers, we have to still be strategic. And how we're going to be strategic is through our communication, right? Crisis communication strategies are so important to have before a crisis happens. So when the crisis hits, you have a framework that you can use to navigate how you're going to do your crisis communication strategies. So your immediate response, right? How's your immediate response going to be? You want to respond swiftly to the crisis. You want to acknowledge the situation and provide initial information to the community and your subordinates, so that everyone understands the temperature of the environment. They understand if there's still a threat out there, or if the threat is gone and now it's about working and helping people and getting back to normalcy, right? So your first immediate response is calm the nerves of everybody, get everybody to understand that they have a good team of leadership in place. They have people that really care about the community, and the right thing is being done in the best interest of the community. And I say that with the inference of do not be fluff about it. Do not take the opportunity just to say things to them, because the community will pick up on that, and the end result of the operation of your crisis will be different than what you're saying. So you want to make sure you're honest, you're humble about it, you're transparent about it, and you want to make sure that you're addressing the concerns of the community. Every time you provide that update, you want to make sure every communication is transparent in everything you do. The last thing you want to do is make sure that you have consistent messaging. It's so important to be consistent with your messaging. So before you go out and you deliver your next message as you transpose through this crisis, you want to make sure you review your message before, right? A lot of times leaders forget to do that. They forget to go back and take a couple minutes to say, okay, what did I say at the last email that I put out, or what that last press conference that I did? What did I say? What were the questions that were asked? How did I respond to them? And that will help you give a gauge on when you deliver that consistent message and accurate information across your communication channels. It also provides the opportunity for you to clarify and identify any clarifications that you need to make. It's better that you identify those issues that need to be clarified than the community or your employees think that, one, you don't know what you're doing, two, you're supplying wrong information to them, or three, you're lying to them, right? So you want to make sure that through your crisis communication strategies that you're always navigating the communication process by looking at what you did in the previous communication, however you put it out through, social media, emails, or live transmission and interviews. You want to make sure you review those before you give your next press brief or your communication brief. That way you can keep the consistency and the transparency through your communication messaging. So effective communication for different situations and scenarios. I put this in here because there's a variety of people that may be on the WebEx. If you have a product failure, you want to make sure you're focusing on safety, accountability, and immediate solutions when it comes to your crisis in your community, right? So if you work in housing and the pipes that just were put into the ground and they're faulty, and now you have to go back and correct all those issues, you want to make sure your communication is focused on safety. You want to focus on accountability. There's nothing wrong with saying exactly what the facts are of the situation, right? You can fall on the sword softly to make sure that people understand that this wasn't malicious. It was an accident that happened, and we're correcting it. So you want to give the immediate solution. Economic downturn in your community, you want to look at emphasizing financial stability, job security, and community support. Let people know where they stand. A lot of people just want to know the facts. They just want to know when a crisis is occurring. They want to know exactly what those areas are that's going to make them comfortable. So knowing your community, knowing what those expectations are of them, you'll be able to deliver that message to them. If you do a policy change, especially during crisis, you want to make sure that you provide clear explanations, address the concerns, and engage that constructive dialogue. Sometimes when you change policy, when a crisis happens, people don't understand, because on an average day, you may have an individual that lives in the black and white world. So they know the policy better than us, right? As employees or leaders, sometimes the community members know the policy better than us because they're so ingrained into learning the policy and learning what's in black and white, right? They may not have that applying piece, how the policy applies, but they know and they're very versed on the policy. So when you change policy during crisis, you want to make sure you have a clear explanation, you address the concerns on why the policy is being changed, and you need to expect that there may be some engagement in constructive dialogue when it comes to changing the policy. So that's important for you to focus on effective communication when it comes to different situations. In emergency or crisis situations, you should focus on core elements that are intended to be clear, they're actionable, and they achieve the outcome for the community. Some of the areas you can focus on is the accuracy and honesty of the information, your time frame of letting out your communication. That's important when it comes to the community, right? How fast are you getting it out there? The issue you have to balance out is that when you put communication out to the community in your decision making, you have to look at, am I sending information too fast to where it's incomplete? The information isn't necessarily accurate, right? So a lot of times in public safety, one of the things that public safety officials get really good at, and they don't understand this in the beginning, but as your career goes on, you realize that investigations that occur, the first thing that is put out isn't necessarily the totality or the total facts of the situation, but the media and the public want to know what's going on. Facts change based on circumstances that are learned. It's not because somebody didn't do their job or missed something. It's just as you progress into the crisis or progress into the investigation, you learn new pieces of the puzzle. And when you learn those new pieces of the puzzle, sometimes when they collaborate with the other pieces you have, there's a different motive that is exposed. So you have to recognize that when you're going through decision-making process, that how do you put that information out? How fast do you want it to go out? With the understanding is some of those facts may change. Some of those facts may be altered based on new information and new developments that come out. We see that every day in your normal life when you look at the news and you read the newspaper. Things do change, and it's not because of fault of anybody. It's just because new facts are developed, they're identified, and then when you put all the puzzle together, the total outlook sometimes changes. So you want to look at the action of the orientation. So you focus on the actionable steps that the audience can take to ensure safety is really put in place, right? You want to give the community the ability to understand that their community is safe, whatever is happening is being taken care of, that you have empathy towards whatever they're experiencing, right? All they want to do is understand that you understand what they're going through, right? And that's the message you want to get across when you talk about communication. You want to let them know, and not in so many words, that you see what they're going through, you can feel what they're going through, but you're the best person to address the issue. As the leader of the organization, the leader of tribal government, or the leader of a tribal program, you are the right person in the position, and they should be supportive and also respect that you're going to take care of their needs, just like as if they were taking care of it themselves. So their problem now has become your problem, and you're going to solve that problem for them. So you want to make sure when you go through those communication steps that you are consistent, you're transparent, and be ready to counter any misinformation or rumors that are out there in the community that you may not be aware of, but you may get hit with once you drop the facts that you're putting out, right? So you want to be ready for that, and you want to respond in a positive way, right? Sometimes information comes to you and you're kind of like, where did that come from? How can somebody derive that information from what's going on? And absent of information, people add their own spin on things, or what their knowledge of what they've been told, right? They may have been told something that isn't accurate, but in their mind, it's accurate, right? So, because that's all they know. And so they're going to pass that along. And before it goes to the fourth or fifth person, the whole story has changed. So you want to make sure through your communication process that you are ready for any misinformation, so you can deal with all situations that come upon you. The role of key players in crisis management is so important, and this is important to have this in your policies prior to the crisis hits. Tribal leaders have a clear role in every process when there's a crisis in the community. They also have a responsibility, an inherent responsibility, to recognize who their team is, who can help them mitigate some of the issues to make key decisions and communicate to the community, right? A lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, leaders feel that everything's on their shoulders. They have to do it all themselves. Same thing with tribal leaders. You don't have to be the person that has all the answers, right? You just have to be the person to drive the ship that is going to solve the problem in the community, communicate to the community exactly what happened, what's being done to fix it, and then what's going to be done after everything is completed through the crisis. Know who your team is. It's very important when we look at emergency situations. A lot of organizations use the emergency management team to facilitate. Emergency management teams are important, but they also have a role when it comes to the crisis management protocols, the response efforts, managing resources. So you want to know what that emergency team lines are, right? They're not going to be the overall 100% decision maker of the organization, right? They're a support organization that brings and collaborates organizations together and coordinates that effort to make your community safe. So if you have 15 programs, emergency management's job is to bring those 15 programs together. They're the subject matter experts of each program. Emergency management brings that core group together, and then they facilitate that response, right? The subject matter experts when it comes to a housing issue is not emergency management. Emergency management is just to get housing to the table, so housing, who is the subject matter expert, can make the decision and the right decision for the community. You don't want emergency management making decisions for your program. And I don't say that as a slight to emergency management, because emergency management has a place in your organization when it comes to decision making. However, you do not allow anybody to take away your subject matter expertise when it comes to being a leader. You're the subject matter expert in your area. You're the technical expert that can come to the table, and you can support emergency management when it comes to them facilitating and coordinating the response. Part of that response is your communication team. A lot of times leaders think they have to be in the front when they put the information out. A tribal leader sometimes may take it on their shoulders to be the only person to communicate to the community, and that is fine. However, there's other ways to deal with that. So you can have a communication team where those subject matter experts, depending on the crisis, can be put in place to be part of a communication team. So if you have a framework in place before a crisis happens, then everybody knows what the rules of the road are when that crisis happens. So identify who that communication team is, and then make sure through the process that the dissemination of information, managing media, or managing the community's expectations and engaging with the community is consistent, right? And that includes all the subject matter experts in that field. So sometimes you want to put, if you're a tribal leader, put the health director out front to communicate to the general public, right? Sometimes the community only wants to hear from the tribal leader, and that's fine. It just puts that responsibility on the tribal leader to make sure their health director or whoever that director is providing the feedback and is there to support them during that process of releasing the information. So what you want to do prior to the crisis, you want to develop a crisis communication plan. You want to identify all those risks to determine those crises that could impact the community. And you want to practice this. You want to identify the risk and then practice it. You want to develop response strategies and then practice it. You want to make sure that you establish clear protocols and communication plans for each risk, right? And that should be in your plan, your communication plan. And then you want to test and train on it. And you just don't want to do it one time and let it go. You want to continue, do regular communication tests, plans, train your personnel. Again, train them to retain the information, right? We've all heard the adage, and I said it yesterday's webinar, is, we've all grew up in the age of, practice makes perfect. My philosophy is practice until it becomes permanent. So when you go through your crisis communication plan, practice until it becomes permanent for the employees. So that way, when the crisis hits, they're not fumbling through saying, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? What's the communication plan and what's my role? Everybody already knows what the role is because they've been practicing it to make sure that it's permanent in their everyday work structure, their job description, and their expectations of as being a tribal employee. Part of this process is you want to build trust and confidence in the crisis, right? So part of the communication and decision-making is to be honest and transparent. You do not want to lose your community or your customers or your employees if you have bad communication that appears that it's not honest, or maybe you're hiding something. So you always want to deliver honesty and transparency and let people know that you care. There's nothing wrong with showing that you care and you have compassion and understanding for the community and what they're going through. When you're looking at decision making, you're human too. So that stress is upon you, and you're going to be encountered with all those vast emotions that come over, right? And you're also going to be that person that you may think, I'm not supposed to show weakness. And some people are brought up that way, and that's fine. But the reality is, when you're a leader, sometimes people have to understand what you're going through for them to understand that you're taking care of business and you're the leader at it, and you're taking into account exactly what their expectations are. So you want to show empathy, you want to show compassion, and you always want to be open. You always want to engage the community. You want to listen to their concerns. Even if you know their concerns are being dealt with, let them have a voice. It's important for people to have a voice, to voice out their concerns through that crisis. And that voice can help you make better decisions when it comes to decision making. When you develop your, let me see here. It's important to be in the position of continuous learning. So it's a piece that you have to look at when you develop your staff. You want to be a learning organization. You want to be a learning organization that is constantly learning, right? And the term learning organization is a perfect segue if you want to develop change in your organization. And what that means is you develop the organizational culture where everyone in their mindset is, it's all about learning. It's all about learning something new, learning the right way to do things, learning when to change when we have to change, learning ways to develop new plans or add different scenarios when it comes to improving our response, right? So you have the post-crisis reviews that can help you do that. Training and drills can help you do that. And then staying informed. And staying informed means working with other tribes when it comes to their policies and procedures, right? You always can learn from each other. Not one organization does it best for our organization. So we need to take everybody's expertise, bring it into our umbrella, bring it into our environment, and see how that's going to fit in our environment. And we make it all wrapped up into what's going to be successful for us. But if you can teach your employees to be a learning organization, a learning environment, where they understand that every day they come in, they're going to learn something new. Now, there's a part of this that as a leader, you have to understand. You don't want to take a hammer out at them when they do something wrong. How you deal with them on a daily basis is important for that learning environment future. So as they're learning, they're going to make mistakes. As they're growing, they're going to make mistakes. So you want to progressively deal with them and teach them, train them, right? Let them know when they do something wrong, build them up. Sometimes as a leader, you have to break employees down so they get down to that bottom framework so you can build them back up. But let them know that this is a learning organization and your whole goal is to improve their work performance so they deliver a work product that is above reproach for the community and the other subordinates around them. So there's a piece of this as a leader when it comes to decision making. Before that crisis happens, you want to make sure that the culture within your organization recognizes that you're a learning organization and you're going to continuously learn. You're just not going to make a policy or say this is the way we're going to do it and then forget it. And basically that's the way it is, right? Your policies are in place to evolve. They're not in there just to stay stagnant. So a learning organization will help you through that process. It'll help you always develop and look how you're doing things today. So tomorrow you're going to do it better than you did today. Tomorrow you're going to improve. And the day after that, you're going to improve then better than what you do tomorrow. So you always, every day, you want to make sure your organization is always improving on everything that they do. Key takeaways for strategic decision-making in crisis: you want to embrace the challenge as a leader. It's so important that you embrace the challenge and you do not allow fear to come in and mitigate that issue, right? We all deal with fear in our lives. And the only way you can get rid of fear is if you hit it head on, right? And the root cause of fear is you, right? It's us as the individual. We're the ones who allow fear into our space. So you want to make sure that you do not allow fear to overtake you when it comes to your crisis that you're going through, because the fear will alter your decision making. And you want to make sure that that fear doesn't expose itself, because we all have traveled our journey and we've exposed or been exposed to fear in our process, and we've allowed fear to overtake us. And we may think that fear is gone, but a crisis could bring that fear to the forefront. So you want to make sure that you are in touch with that piece of fear, that if it comes up, you can push it down, you can make sure it doesn't affect you, and you can mitigate that. Fear is that voice in your head that tells you it can't be done. It says that others will laugh at you or creep in or just at the right moment, and gives you the excuse to stop or alter your behavior. Don't worry about what people think of you, right? And I know this is easier said than done, and each one of us has to process through the process of fear and how we deal with it. But I encourage you, don't worry about what people think of you. Focus on doing the right thing always, and doing the right thing at every given time and every given corner, right? And that will push fear away. When you do what's right, right? You may not do it perfect, but you do what's right. And when you do what's right, good things happen, right? And you will get through whatever crisis you're going through. Part of that fear also can mitigate it through the collective action of leveraging the power of everybody together, right? You're not alone as a leader. Bringing everybody together will minimize your fear. So if you're an individual who really has a lot of fear, that's okay. Surround yourself with people who can assist you, and not telling them you have a lot of fear, but when you're communicating with them, they're going to give you that candid response that'll help you process through your fear and make that right decision and really push that fear away. So make sure you have a good, sound core team around you that can help you, progress through your fear. You want to maintain that the resiliency in the face of adversity is really what you're focused on, right? You want to make sure that the aroma that you give out as the leader is that you have hope, you have resiliency that's going to get you through whatever this crisis is or whatever that crisis is, and you're going to use the expertise around you and that knowledge, skill, and ability that you have to get through this decision making, right? So when you look at decision making crisis, those are the three areas you want to embrace. You want to embrace the challenge, push the fear away. You want to work together with other individuals within your organization or maybe externally, and you always want to be resilient. You want to make sure that you keep that hope that whatever you're going through, you're the right person in the position, and keep telling yourself, if that fear starts to show its head, keep telling yourself you're the right person in the position, you're going to do the right thing, you're going to make the right decisions, because you are the subject matter expert and the leader that's going to get you through whatever that crisis is in the best interest of your community. So let's talk a little bit about the introduction of strategic decision making. The definition of strategic decision making is the process of choosing the best course of action to achieve the desired outcome. Why is this important? Because it's critical for effective leadership and organizational success. People depend on you when it comes to the strategic decision making during a crisis. So knowing the definition of choosing the best course of action to achieve the desired outcome, keep that at the forefront when you're going through your crisis. If you understand what strategic decision making is, you will always make the right decision, and you will show that you're an effective leader and that your organization will be successful at the end of the crisis. What I talked about earlier, this is the decision making process. What I encourage you to do, you can take this slide, you can print it out, keep it on your desk just as a reminder. You can look at it as a guide. It's just the decision making process that really can help you formulate a good decision as you go through the process, and then it allows you to evaluate and continuously look at during the process of the crisis. So you want to define the problem, clearly identify the issue and how it's impacting the organization and the community. You want to gather the most information that you can, collect all the relevant informational data, the insights that will inform to allow you to make that best decision. You want to generate options, right? Develop a range of possible solutions to address the problem. one of the things you want to do is you want to look at just not have one solution to the problem, because if you had that one solution, that crisis probably wouldn't have occurred. So as you navigate your decision making, you want to generate several different solutions, because you may have three possible solutions and one may not be the exact fit. So you may take a little bit of all three and put them together to allow you to make that best decision. You want to evaluate your decisions. You want to analyze the pros and cons of the process and consider the risk and benefits of each decision. That is so important. Look in the mirror. If you don't think it's good, say it. It's not good. You got to change it. There's nothing wrong with keeping the ability open for you to look at the pros and cons and then changing them as you go to make sure it's going to be in the best interest of your employees and the community. Choose the best option, right? Again, you may have multiple options that have to work together, but it gives you the opportunity to choose the best option. Implement your decision. Put the chosen option into action and monitor the progress, right? A lot of people put it into action and they forget about it. Always do the follow-up. Follow-up is so important. Ask those questions. See how your decision is following through. See the impacts of your decision, not just necessarily in the crisis, but how is your decision affecting the community? How's your decision affecting the employees, right? Is it hurting morale? Is your decision impacting morale where now it's going to have a negative effect on the crisis overall where the community is going to be hurt? So you want to look at, when you implement your decision, you want to make sure you're monitoring that progress, you're evaluating the results, you're assessing the effectiveness of the decision and then you're going to make adjustments as necessary. Just because you make a decision, you put something in place, there's nothing wrong with evaluating it and making it better. And so I encourage you, you can print this slide out, keep it as the holy grail on your desk. Just gives you that framework as you're going through, you're working with your team, gives you the opportunity to always go back to decision-making process, and it creates a framework to where you can do your job a little bit more effective without stressing over it. Some of the factors influenced by strategic decision makings is your organizational values, your core principles and beliefs that guide decision making. As you're going through process in the crisis and decision making, your organizational values come into question, right? What's the risk? Are you in line with your organizational values? Are you doing everything based on those values that are in place, right? And are you contradicting those values of your organizations, right? That could influence negative or positive that decision, right? Stakeholder interests, the needs and expectations of those affected by the decision, right? That is something that can influence your decision, and you need to think about as you progress through your decision-making process. How does my decision affect the stakeholders that are involved? External environment, you have politics that are involved, you have technology that's involved, all these things from a social aspect that impact your decision making. Politics is probably the biggest one that's involved, that you can't control politics, right? However, you can mitigate politics, and that's through communication, right? Focus on the right thing, focus on doing the right thing, communicating with the community, communicate with your politicians before you put something out, right? So that way, arm them with the information before you put it out. Give them the information so when their constituents call, they understand what they can tell their community. If they have the same information and they're telling their community what you're putting out, then everybody's in line, right? One of the mistakes I always see is sometimes we under-communicate, especially with programs. They don't communicate well enough with politicians. So when politicians get the phone call from the community, they don't necessarily have the answers. You want to arm your politicians with the answers so they can pass it along to the constituents. They've been put in place by a vote. Regardless of opinions of that vote, they are the leader and they're the political position. So arm them with the information so they can provide the data to their constituents. And then that way, everybody's in line with the same message, because you do not want different variables giving different messages out when you're all supposed to be on the same team. Again, what else can influence strategic decision making? Financial constraints, human constraints, your employees. Your employees are a key factor when it comes to your decision making. So you need to make sure that through your process, your employees are really being communicated and over communicate with them. Make sure they understand what really the expectations are, what is expected of them, what is expected of how they're supposed to take care of the community, and provide that opportunity for them to also have a voice just like your community. Because sometimes they're afraid to speak out, especially during crisis. Stress is involved, emotions are involved, and maybe voices are being raised just because that adrenaline's going. And maybe somebody doesn't want to speak out, and they have a good opinion, they have a good solution. Make sure they have that opportunity to either speak out in verbally, or if they can put it in writing towards you, so that way they feel that they have a impact in the decision making or in the ultimate solution to help that crisis come to an end. So we want to analyze some decision-making scenarios just quickly. Budget cuts. When we look at analyzing decision-making scenarios, how to prioritize spending and minimize impact on essential services. As a leader, the last thing you want to be told is there's budget cuts, right? It puts you into panic. You have to look at things, and we're all being asked to do more with less. So when you look at your decision-making and you're being told to do budget cuts, that could put a crisis upon you. Take the opportunity to look at it as a positive. Everything you do, if you look at it through a positive, regardless of what the crisis is, you're going to come out better on the other side. Look at the process, how your organization could be better. If there's budget cuts that have to be made, how can your organization be better? I know we don't like change, but sometimes change is good. So we have to sit back as a leader, sit back and look at the positive. Pull the positive out of all the negative environment or negative situations that are upon us. Community health crisis. How do we respond to a public health emergency, considering the sensitivities of the community that we work for? As a leader, you want to make sure, especially after COVID, everybody's on heightened awareness, right? Everybody is waiting for that next COVID-19 to hit, or that heavier medical season or flu season is going to hit us. You want to make sure that you're well versed and well prepared for those decision-making scenarios, right? If you're a tribal leader or an executive, put those health people right next to you when it comes to those events. So if you have a community health crisis, put the subject matter experts around you that can help you through that process. Same thing with the budget cuts. Sit down with your budget people, get their feedback. They may not always have the right answer because they're looking at through a fiscal responsibility piece. You're the subject matter expert in your field. If the two of you come together, there's an opportunity to at least accomplish what those expectations are, and you can formulate a good plan when it comes to your decision making. So you want to make sure that whoever those subject matter experts are, regardless if it's a budget, fiscal responsibility people, the health director, or the doctor in charge of your health department, or your economic development people, put them next to you at the table and get their feedback, and also put them in positions. Ask them those hard questions instead of allowing them to just give you a direction. Put them in a position to where they're working with you instead of against you, to allow you to make a good, sound decision for your program as a leader. Developing decision-making skills. One of the aspects that we always want to improve on is our critical thinking. We want to develop the ability to analyze information objectively and identify underlying assumptions. We want to become a better problem solver. We want to enhance our skills in identifying and analyzing and solving complex problems. Sometimes we're living in crisis, right? And I've experienced that throughout my career. It's just there's not enough time in a day or days in a week and weeks in a year, right? Sometimes we have to hit that pause button. We have to force ourselves to hit that pause button so we can enhance our skills in identifying and analyzing and solving problems. We also want to communicate better, right? We want to improve our communication skills to be effective. We want to convey the decision and build consensus. The one thing as a leader that I encourage all of you to do is hit the pause button and give yourself the opportunity to learn, right? When you have to make the decisions, there's a thought process out there that once you become the leader, you're supposed to have all the answers, right? The key is recognizing you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to know where to get them, right? You have to understand where to get them. You have to be one step ahead of everybody else, not necessarily with the answer, but on your knowledge and skills, right? So hit the pause button and allow yourself the opportunity to be a better leader. Educate yourself, read books, listen to audiobooks, go to training. Give yourself that opportunity, because we can use the excuse that, well, I'm too busy, I can't do any of that. And then time and proficiency is going to pass you by. Don't do that to yourself. As a good leader, hit the pause button and make sure you get what you need to develop your knowledge, skills, and ability. So when you have to make a decision, and it's a strategic decision in the time of crisis, you're going to make that sound decision based on your knowledge, skill, and ability. And the only way you do that is always continue to make yourself better, get that educational knowledge, that training, the problem solving, the critical thinking. And that is a constant for us. And we always should be looking through that every day. We always want to improve every day. Strategies to be effective decision-making: bring your team together and brainstorm, right? Generate different ideas within your team. So many times do leaders fail to recognize the fact that their team, who's the boots on the ground, have a lot of good answers or good solutions that can help the overall picture. It's just, how do we get it out of them, right? So bring them in, have them provide an opportunity that you'll be able to steal information from them or drag the information out of them, that you can brainstorm with them and allow them to have a voice. That voice is going to help you when it comes to the time when you're in crisis, because those are the ones that are boots on the ground. Those are the ones that are there doing the job for us as leaders. So, and one of the things that I learned early on in my career is that, when I started in law enforcement, we were working 8-hour shifts. I was on the reservation for 8 hours as a patrolman, right? Well, out of 8 hours, there's still 16 hours that I'm not there. 16 hours is a long time for things to happen, right? Tribal members are in that community 24 hours a day. I'm only there 8, right? So there's 16 hours that I have to try to understand, because I'm just not responsible for those 8 hours. I'm responsible for the all 24. I'm just there those 8 hours. So when I come into work, I want to know what happened those 16 hours prior to. So what I did was I made sure that, one, as a team, as our shift, we got together and we brainstormed on different ideas. The other piece is I got with the community members that I was able to build relationships with, who was able to provide intelligence or information or just the community's temperature on that 16 hours that I wasn't there. So they knew when I wasn't working, that when I was coming back in, that they were able to provide some information to me on the threats that were in the community, the problems that were in the community, that would help me do my job and be more effective during that 8 hours I was there. So just understand, your employee base has a lot of information that you as a leader can take from them, and you can learn from them as a leader. So provide that opportunity for them to have a voice. It's so important, and I learned that early on in my career, and I think that was part of my success from my leadership journey, is to really look at the big picture aspect of understanding when you give people a voice, you're more successful. And in a time of crisis, as a leader, that's what you want. You want to be more successful. So if you're successful when things are quiet, right? When the stress hits, you're going to have a little bit better framework on dealing with that crisis, because you're always being prepared. So that's just something to keep in mind. Cost benefit analysis. You want to evaluate the financial and non-financial implications of different options, and risk assessments. You want to identify potential risk and develop mitigation strategies. If you're sitting in an office right now and something happens, say there was a critical event that happened in the building, the question that you should ask yourself right now is, what are you going to do as the leader? Don't say it on the webinar. I just posed that question to you. Is if you're sitting at your desk, you're watching this webinar, a critical event happens inside your building right now, and something bad is happening in your building, as the leader, what do you do? Right? That's a feeling that when that feeling comes to you, you want to at least have a framework to work off of. So before anything like that happens, you want to make sure you do a risk assessment, identify what those potential risks are, and identify what your responsibility as a leader to mitigate those strategies. So, and what are you supposed to do as a leader? What's your role? What's your responsibility? Who are you supposed to take care of? How are you supposed to respond? So risk assessments are ongoing. They should never stop. And it's not just in the building that you're working in, it's in the community and the environment that you work at. And that's something you always want to role play through and have those thoughts when you're driving to lunch, when you're driving home, replay your day. There's times in your life that you have that opportunity to kind of have those non-threatening thoughts that can prepare you. Take some notes, and when you go back into the office, you're able to look at those notes and formulate a plan. And before you know it, you'll have a policy that addresses some of those risk assessments that you're dealing with every day. Here's another slide, the importance of data-driven decision-making. You can use this as a template. Data collection, you want to gather the relevant data to inform decision-making. You want to analyze that data. The key to analyzing data is you have a view, other people also have a view. So bring your core team together, analyze the data separately, and then come together and share that data analyzation together to see if you're on the same path, right? You want to look at patterns, you want to look at trends, you want to make sure that you're all on the same page and you're all seeing the same thing. You don't want everybody to have the same view. That's why I stress to you is analyze the data separately, and then those leaders that you surround yourself with, bring them to the table and have them give their view before you give your view as a leader. Give your view last. Allow people to provide their patterns and trends that they see, so that way no one is just following you just because you're the leader. You want that unvetted information, even if you don't like to hear it. You want that information. So don't give your opinion first. Give it last. Let others speak and provide their expertise, and then you should give your information last, because your information may change after hearing what everybody else's solutions are on the pattern and trends. Again, data visualization is very important. A lot of times we can read something and people can tell us about something, but when it's on a chart or it's on a webinar, on a screen, on a TV, sometimes we have a better understanding of it. And sometimes the KISS theory of keep it simple is the way to go. So visualization when it comes to your data presentation helps you when it comes to decision making. Decision making in a tribal context, again, this is a conversation you should have and continuously have when it comes to your decision making. You want to make sure you safeguard your cultural values. Community engagement is definitely important with this. And then self-governance is, again, as we talked about earlier, is something that is crucial when it comes to decision-making. So decision-making in the tribal context, you want to make sure this is part of your discussion, especially if you have non-tribal members in your environment. You want to make sure that it's a constant, right? It's respect, it's an understanding, and it's the appreciation. So when they have a crisis in their environment, regardless if it's in the community or in the office, that they will always respect the traditional values of your tribe. Case studies when it comes to economical development, we want to look at projecting the goals, the decision factors, and the stakeholder engagements. Those are the three areas when it comes to economic development. When you have a crisis, we want to increase the economic opportunities. That's one of the goals we could have when it comes to tribal economic development. Part of the decision making in this process would be the environmental impacts, cultural sensitivities, financial feasibilities, right? And then under stakeholder engagement, involving tribal leaders, community members, and potential investments. This is a framework that you could use if you're involved in tribal economic development. These are those three tiers frameworks I wanted to provide you, that as you go through any type of economic development, this can start the framework for you, and then you build off of it. When we look at the tribal health initiatives, the same thing. We want community health needs to be assessed. We want to take traditional practices to make sure they're involved, and then we want to make sure what that access to healthcare is. This is something that we just all experienced, and I hate to continue to go back, but I think a lot of lessons can be learned to it, is the COVID. No one knew what to expect with COVID, and putting your health people up front, the subject matter experts, these are the areas what they would have to look at when it comes to a situation like COVID. When COVID hit, they needed to do a community assessment, identifying the pressing issue, how COVID was going to impact the community. The second issue was they didn't want to disrespect or take away from the traditional healing practices versus the modern healthcare. How does this crisis impact those two? How do we continue to keep those two together to make sure that they're both respected and the community is safe overall? And then lastly, we want to ensure the community members have the access to quality healthcare through the process. So when we look at case studies, that's how you want to derive some of these issues to provide you that decision-making process as a leader. You can take these variables and apply them to a lot of different areas that will help you when a crisis occurs, that'll help you during that crisis time. So I encourage you, when you look at these case studies and you have other case studies in your community that's impacted, you can use them now when the crisis isn't there. So when the crisis happens, that framework is already built out for you. Tribal education programs, people may say, well, that's not something that really is going to be in crisis. Well, there is a crisis part of that that we experienced at Seminole. And one of the areas that I share with you on that is, hurricanes come through Florida. We have individuals that are throughout the, not only the state of Florida, they're throughout the country, and they go to college, right? So here's 17, 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids that are in college or away from their family, and they're being impacted by a crisis. So the education department does have a role when it comes to those crises. So at Seminole, what we did was we tasked education to contact every student, not their parents. We wanted to deal directly with the student to find out how they were doing, what they were doing for that crisis they were going to be involved in, what their needs were, exactly where they were going, their friends' names, their contact information. Although we did have a lot of their parent information, we asked them what their parent information, so we were able to confirm all that information. And then their needs. If they needed something or they needed to be taken out of their environment, then we were able to work with other programs to develop how we were going to get them out of there and get them safe before that crisis hit, or if they were in the middle of the crisis. So that's part of your crisis management when it comes to decision making. You want to do it in advance. So that is a process we put in place, and it actually started during a hurricane that was supposed to hit North Florida. It was going to be a Hurricane 5, one of the worst hurricanes that was projected to hit. We had people that went to several of the universities up there, and just by sitting down with people in public safety, we were able to identify the education department as a core team member, because our Explorer program had individuals that used to be in the Explorer program. They were in college. And so the officer who was in charge of the Explorers, they were able to identify that these kids were going to be in the path of this hurricane. And so that was a decision that created, not just for that event, it created a whole new policy for us moving forward with hurricanes, because we were able to implement it during that time of the hurricane. We were able to identify those kids, make sure that they were safe when the hurricane was going to hit. And then for future hurricanes, we were able to instill a policy to where even before the hurricanes hit, we know exactly where these kids are. We know exactly what colleges they go to. We know what community they're in. And then we have plans in place. If we have to remove them, how are we going to get them out from the location they're in? And then we bring their parents involved in that process. So you want to make sure decision-making, that you provide that opportunity in the front end of a crisis. But there are times in the middle of the crisis, you'll develop some plans, and those plans will actually evolve to be very good core plans for the future when it comes to crises that impact your community. Decision-making in times of change. I don't speak for any of you, but I would probably say that a lot of people on this webinar are resistant to change. I know I'm resistant to change because I like to be in my comfort zone. The reality is, as a leader, we can't be in our comfort zone. We have to be able to adjust to change. We have to have the ability to adjust to change to those circumstances when things approach. And as a leader, people depend on you. So if you're a leader and you're resistant to change, you need to find ways to balance yourself out to where you accept change, you can embrace change, and you can be adaptable to the change. Part of that adapting to change is you will then create your mindset to be innovative, and you can develop new solutions to address those challenges, and you can seize that opportunity to make decisions as the leader during that time, right? So the other part of that is that you then have to take that new innovative idea that you have or decision you have, and you have to pass that down to people who are in the same position that maybe somebody on this call is, where they're resistant to change. How do you take that information and get somebody to change based on the new direction you're going, and that person doesn't like change? One aspect of that, give them an opportunity to have buy-in, give them an opportunity to have a say so they can take ownership in that decision-making process. So it's really about ownership and owning the decision, or at least having input so people have the worth, and they have the ability to recognize they were part of that solution. And that really makes people feel good. So as you go through your process of decision-making, strategic decision-making, and change, always focus on improving yourself, adapting to change, embracing change, and then getting that work done through others and getting people to have a voice. And if you can get them to have a voice, that change process is going to be a lot easier. You want to embrace the growth mindset. Again, continuous learning, a learning environment, getting that feedback, constant feedback, going out in the community, asking them, how are we doing? Even asking them what those expectations are if a crisis would hit. Get that feedback. The more people that talk to you, the better you're going to be when it comes to developing that decision-making in that time of crisis. Again, it's all about being resilient, and you want to persevere. You want to maintain a positive outlook and persistency in the face of setbacks. I will tell you, when you're in the middle of a crisis, it's stressful. You have a lot of emotion. You had the anxiety that's upon you. That's fine. That's normal. Give yourself, as the leader, the opportunity to go in a room, shut the door. If you have to let out your emotions, let them out, and then regroup and go back out and fight the good fight. That's really what a good leader does. So recognize who you are, recognize that you're still human, that you still have emotions during this process, and that you are the right person for the position, and you're going to take the steps for you to make sure that your mental health and your health is at the point where you can deal safely, but you can be that good leader for people without compromising the overall operation. Power of collaboration. It's so important that you work together with everybody and understanding what everybody's role is. A lot of times in public safety, we learn what other programs do, and it's by default because public safety's out front. They're usually handling crises, and that's really what they handle full time. So they learn what other programs do just through the crisis. What I encourage other programs to do is, you don't have to be the expert in other programs, but understand what those other programs' expectations are, what their service delivery is, and really that high level service they provide to the community. Because if you understand that, when you make a decision and you bring people together to collaborate, you're going to be in a better position to understand what they do and what they can do for you and do for you in the program that you're in. So you want to have that collective ownership. You want to share that sense of responsibility with everybody involved, right? It's a big family that's coming together to make sure your community is safe. Building a culture of decision-making, that's really what it's about. You want to provide regular training. You want to establish clear decision-making processes that are transparent, and you want to keep open communication when it comes to the dialogue and the feedback of decision-making. So important to be honest. Your community, your employees want to make sure that you're transparent and that you're holding them accountable, but you're also holding yourself accountable. You want to make sure that your actions are in line. There's integrity, there's ethical decisions that you're making, and that you're doing it in the best interest of the tribe and the community. So you want to prioritize your ethical decision making, and you want to make sure they align with your organizational values and your community expectations. Again, the role of leadership is to be the visionary, to give direction, empower your employees, empower your community, and then hold yourself accountable and hold others accountable through the process of the roles of decision making. You want to lead with integrity. That's something that is important. Give people the confidence to know that you're doing the right thing. Present yourself with command presence. Allow them to see that confidence that you have. Even though you may not be confident in certain areas, don't display that you're not confident. Build up that confidence. You're put in a position to be a leader. You have the title to be a leader. Now it's your responsibility to make sure that you're that high-level leader that can lead with integrity and respect and get a community through that crisis. Key takeaways for decision-making for tribal governments: teamwork, collaboration. I can't stress to you enough, you may be the highest leader in the organization, but you will not succeed and you will not be successful alone. You want to make sure you collaborate with all the organizations, all the programs, all the leaders, and the community. You want to make sure all those stakeholders are at the table. Community ownership, again, work through the process of ensuring decision-making is aligned with your community values and priorities. And then lastly, which I think is important, is consider the generational impacts, consider the long-term impacts of your decision making. And I will tell you that probably one of the things that I'm encouraged with is the fact that the younger generation, bring them to the table, get feedback from them, allow them to have a voice, because the future is theirs. They're the future leaders of your organization. They're the future leaders of the community. And it's important for them to have ownership and carry along the legacy that you have created. And in order for them to carry that legacy along and that legacy of leadership along, you have to engage them. You have to bring them to the table so they are at the top of their game when it's their time to take over. I want to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time to collaborate with you on the decision-making on executive leadership and engagement in the time of crisis, webinar number 2. This is our contact information over here to the left. It's in the PowerPoint on the second to last slide. I appreciate you. I wish you all the best this afternoon in your leadership journey, and I look forward to you joining us tomorrow when we talk about the next webinar when it comes to effective crisis communication strategies for tribal leaders. Brooke, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Will. That was a lot of really, really important information. Thank you for another great webinar. I did go ahead and put the webinar feedback survey link for y'all into the chat. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to complete that for us, helps us know what's working, what we can improve upon, and the surveys are anonymous, so feel free to be as candid as you would like. We hope you can join us for day 3. That will be tomorrow. If you've already registered for the site, all you have to do is log into the platform and you'll click on a green banner once again and you'll join just like you did today. No need to re-register. You just have to register that one time. If you want to catch this as well as any of our other recorded webinars, you can find them on our YouTube channel. We have an entire CAFIDA webinar archive, goes back about 2 years. And we hope you can check out our upcoming events. They're posted to our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. We have our in-house produced podcast, the Hope-A-Thing, a Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are somebody who prefers to watch the interviews with our special guests, that is also posted to our YouTube channel. All right, folks. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. We hope to see you back tomorrow. Again, same time, same place for day 3 of the series. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. We hope to connect with you really soon. Thanks again, Will. Take care, everybody.